And hello and good evening. Hello everyone, welcome. Please let me know with a 1 in the chat if you're getting my audio and if things are streaming well. But good evening, great to see everyone. It's 7 p.m. here in Poland. It's been a beautiful day and a great evening. So yeah, nice to see you. I see the Wizard's Words. Evening to everyone when they turn up for this live. Yeah, good. Yes, I'm well, thank you, Wizard's Words. I hope you are too. Yeah, so I am currently streaming live. I should be on YouTube, Rumble, and of course X. So today we're discussing the reliability, or shall we say the unreliability, of the Sira. The Sira are the biographies of Mohammed, and of course the Hadiths, reports about Muhammad's life. And these contain information that is not present in the Quran. Like, for instance, where do you go if you want to find out how specifically, what are the steps that you need to do to perform the Muslim prayer? Not in the Quran. The Quran will say, yes, do the prayer. But how do you do it? What about the history of Muhammad? What about the history of Islam in the early years? That comes from the Sira, the biographies of Muhammad, effectively Mo's Gospels. So we're going to have a look at these. This is part 2 of this. I'll do 15 slides today, and then I'll need to work on the rest again and do that as another section. So let's dive in. This is where we ended up last time. We just load the slides. All right. Right, we ended on this slide last time, so I'll just pick up where we left off, and then I'll go to the new slides after that. We've already discussed that these are not reliable reports. Western scholars have examined these critically, and they've discovered numerous issues. There are numerous claims of fraud, of absolute fabrication within these Islamic sources. So we see here, traditional critical research has concluded or conclusively demonstrated that the existence in Islamic tradition of a heavy overlay of pious legend and the influence of manipulations, distortions, and fabrications of all kinds, tampering with the tradition, which makes it unclear where the kernel of historical truth may lie, and that successive layers or authors have repeatedly reshaped and redacted material. And of course, while authentic material on Islamic origins may be found in these two sources, this in the Sunnah, the Sirah, and the Hadith, there is no way to distinguish the authentic from the spurious. We cannot use the Islamic sources to reconstruct Islamic origins. So the source material that supposedly tells the historical origins of Islam cannot be used to reconstruct that history. And yeah, so those are some of the difficulties that we face with this material. And all authentic evidence for the true nature of which has been purged from the tradition. So it asks us to accept on faith, since there is no surviving evidence. So of course, as we know, we've had the earliest sources are missing. Then the source that followed those, which was based on those earlier sources, that's also missing. Then we've got a third layer of sources, which comes after the first two sources that are missing. And this one has two variants, one of which is heavily edited and missing information. And of course, the author had to choose between multiple competing versions and variants to decide what he thought was accurate and then put that in. So you've got this entire tangle of unreliable sources. And we're supposed to take all of this on faith. And of course, it tells us here that tradition abounds in contradictions and evidence of redaction. Right, so let's continue. So now this is in the book Did Muhammad Exist? An Inquiry into Islam's Obscure Origins by Robert Spencer. He quotes numerous Western scholars. And what we have really is a complete lack of evidence for the history of Islam. So Ibn Ishaq's work is the basis of all biographies of Muhammad. Nothing from the contents of Ibn Ishaq is confirmed by inscriptions or other archaeological material. Now, we've already discussed on this channel evidence for the Quran. It's not the Quran, it's the Qurans. We have the Bible, but we have the Qurans. There are many, many different Qurans, many different versions of the Qurans. Now, we've also discussed Mecca. There is no evidence for Mecca. There is no archaeological evidence to prove that Mecca is an ancient city. And I'm just getting a report from my software that... Okay, so I just want to double check that I'm streaming and everything's going well here. Let me just go to the studio. Give me one moment. And yeah, seem to be streaming, so that seems to be going fine. Let's leave it running. Right. Welcome, Sergeant Grinch. Good to see you. So, there's no evidence for Mecca. There's no evidence for the claims that Abraham was in Mecca. There is no evidence to back up the claims about the Kaaba being the oldest temple on earth. There's no evidence for the claim that Mecca is the oldest city on earth and that civilization spread out from Mecca. None whatsoever. It is all to be taken on faith. It is mythical. Testimonies from non-Muslim contemporaries do not exist. Greek, Armenian, Syriac, and other sources about the beginnings of Islam are very difficult to date, but none of them is convincingly contemporary with the Prophet of Islam. Welcome, Lilomain. Good to see you. And yeah, always great to have you guys here. Right, let me continue. Under such circumstances, no biography can be a scholarly work in the modern sense of that word, not even with the help of an omniscient Ibn Ishaq. And this is by Professor Johannes J.G. Jansen in Robert Spencer, Did Mohamed Exist? This is a very well-known scholar of Islam. Right. Now, here's the thing called the leap months issue, and someone mentioned this to me in the chat, so thank you for that. But I was busy going through the evidence at the time, so yeah, it's great that you raised it, so I was able to hone in on that. But leap months. Now, we've got the thing called leap years. Every 4 years we add a day to February, so we get the 29th of February, because this keeps our calendar in sync. Otherwise, because so many different emperors in the past had taken a day from February, added to their month, and then made their months one day longer. Now, a leap month in the early Islamic context refers to an additional month that was occasionally added to the pre-Islamic lunar calendar to align it more closely with the solar year. This practice is called nasi. This allowed the Arabs to adjust their calendar by inserting an extra month, typically every 3 years they would do this, to ensure that the lunar calendar did not drift too far from the seasons. So this practice was officially discontinued in 629 AD, as the Quran forbids the addition of leap months, emphasizing the importance of adhering to the lunar cycle without manipulation. Sergeant Grinch says, Tuesday was the last of my chemotherapy. I've beaten the leukemia. Well done. So glad to hear that. And yeah, well, we'll pray for you and wishing you all the best. Wishing you well and lots of speedy recovery. So CQ says, the story of Abraham building the Kaaba is the reference to Abraham who's built an altar in the Mount of Moriah, Marwa, in the Valley of Becca. Yeah, obviously it's all plagiarism. It's all taking these stories from Jerusalem and trying to transplant it into the New Jerusalem, being Mecca. Right, now the Islamic, of course, now the story I mentioned, the lunar cycle, this is Quran 9, 36 to 37. Now, the Islamic calendar, or the Hijri calendar, now Hijri, this is the hijrah, the immigration, which we're experiencing in Europe right now. Europe and America, of course. Now, hijrah is immigration, and this is when they left Mecca to go to Medina. And this is year 1. So migration, Muslim migration, was so important they based their calendar on it. Not the birth of Mohammed. In Christianity, the birth of Jesus. This starts the Western calendar we have today that people try to hide by using CE, Common Era, meaning the Christian era, or BCE, before the Christian era. So yeah, just use those terms. So the Muslims base their calendar on the Hijrah. Now the Islamic calendar, or Hijri calendar, subsequently adopted a system of leap years that involves adding an extra day to the last month, Dhu al-Hijjah, in certain years rather than adding an entire month. Is it lunar or lunatic cycle? The lunatic cycle, the lunatic calendar. Right. Now, this adjustment occurs within a 30-year cycle. So 11 years are designated as leap years, resulting in a total of either 354 or 355 days in those years. So there was a change from the pre-Islamic calendar to the Islamic calendar. Now, Jansen tells us leap months disprove the Sira. He says, for every event which took place in the life of Mohammed, Ibn Ishaq meticulously records in his Sira in which month it took place. So do understand that the Quran lacks a great deal of context, so it needs to be filled in by these additional sources. So you've got the tafsirs, you've got the Sira, you've got the Hadiths. And of course the Sharia takes all of these, combines them, and creates this whole single legal system that binds it all together. Right. However, the Sira gives the chronology to the Quran. The Sira gives the chronology to the Hadiths. It provides the dating system. It provides a coherent dating system. And the Sira supposedly has a very coherent, very meticulously recorded set of dates. And he says, and this meticulous and systematic dating by month, which is Ibn Ishaq's want, is, of course, one of the main reasons why Western historians classified his book as historiography in the normal sense of that word. He says, how then is it possible that not a single one of these numerous events Ibn Ishaq describes and attaches a date to took place during a leap month? Not one. And Wizard's Word says, I died for 3 minutes on the 11th of July, had 2 hot ups. So yeah, well, great that you're back with us. Right, so not a single event happens during one of these leap months. Now, if his narrative of the life of Muhammad would be based on historical memories and on real events, however distorted, but remembered by real people, how can half a solar year or more remain unmentioned and have disappeared from the record? Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Hisham's biography, Jansen observes, can only date from a period in which people had forgotten the leap months had once existed. These stories by Ibn Ishaq, concludes Jansen, do not attempt to describe memories of events that took place in the past, but they want to convince the reader that the protagonist of these stories, Muhammad, is the messenger of Allah. That's Jansen, The Gospel According to Ibn Ishaq, quoted in Did Muhammad Exist? An Inquiry into Islam's Obscure Origins, 2012, Robert Spencer. So you have here fiction designed to create a narrative, the standard Islamic narrative. All right, so a weak counter-argument. Now, of course, Muslims now have to, or other scholars have to come up with a way to counter this argument, to say, well, you know, I'm sure there's a massive oversight here. We have a massive discrepancy. Historically, this story is full of holes, but let's put together some kind of speculative reason. So some of the arguments they put forward are abolition of the intercalary month. So the Islamic calendar underwent significant reform during Muhammad's lifetime, specifically with the abolition of the intercalary month, or the leap month, in the year 10 AH, or 632 AD. Right. Some scholars argue that Ibn Ishaq, writing in a post-reform context, might have retroactively applied the new calendar to earlier events to maintain consistency with the present or the current calendar system. This is a well-documented historical fact, that there was the intercalary month and that this was replaced. So the Quranic verse 937 forbidding the use of this month, this Nasi practice, was revealed at the pilgrimage of the year 10. The abolition represented a significant change in the Arabian calendar system, transitioning from a lunisolar to a purely lunar calendar. Well, monotheism, moon god worship. That's why you'd have a moon calendar. Ibn Ishaq's approach. So the speculation begins with the suggestion about Ibn Ishaq's methodology. While it's true that Ibn Ishaq wrote his biography of Muhammad over a century after the events that they describe, there is no evidence that he deliberately applied the new calendar to past events. Now, this speculation is an attempt by scholars to explain the absence of leap months in Ibn Ishaq's chronology, as pointed out by Hans Jansen. It's purely a speculative answer. So, now let's look at Guillaume and the Sirat Rasulallah. The Sirat Rasulallah is probably the most famous of these biographies of Muhammad, and you can always get a copy in my archive. Right, so Guillaume, apparently, now I have found, shall we say, contradictory sources that say different things here, so take that as a guide. But Guillaume apparently did not directly use Wüstenfeld's work for his translation of the Sirat Rasulallah. So apparently his translation is based on Ibn Hisham's abridgment of Ibn Ishaq's original work. So you had Ibn Ishaq's work, which was edited And then you've got 2 surviving copies of Ibn Hisham's abridgment. In other words, he edited and shortened that version. And we've got 2 versions of Ibn Hisham, one of which is heavily edited. And he also added additional early sources. Guillaume tried to reconstruct, welcome Thunderous. So Guillaume tried to reconstruct Ibn Ishaq's original text as closely as possible by comparing various early Arabic accounts. This is not too dissimilar from what Wüstenfeld was doing. The translator used Ibn Hisham's abridgment as the main source, but he included many additions and variants found in the writings of early authors. That word variant is very important. That means there were multiple versions of the story, often competing and contradictory versions of the story, and what they had to do is pick which one they liked the most, which one they thought made sense. Guillaume's work is described as a translation of his own reconstruction of Ibn Ishaq, rather than a direct translation of any single existing text. So it's a mishmash, it's a hodgepodge, and again, not very different to the work of Wüstenfeld. And in fact, all the other sources also would include, even the original Muslim sources, seem to have some kind of borrowings from other sources. Right? His method involved rearrangements, omissions, abbreviations, and additions from various sources, which has been criticized by some scholars. But if there was one single authoritative Islamic source, then we could go there. But unfortunately there's not, so what do you do? Remember, the original 4 sources that we discussed in part 1, all of them are missing. There are references to the fact that apparently they existed. Not one exists. Then you had Ibn Ishaq's work. That's missing. Nothing exists. You've got Ibn Hisham's abridgment, of which there are 2 competing versions, one of which is heavily edited. So where's the originals? You've got copies of copies that are gone, and then you've got copies which, well, are not quite reliable. Ishaq's original versus Hisham's abridgment. So Sergeant Grinch asks, is there anything in or about Islam that isn't a lie or interpretation? At this point, the answer is no, there's nothing. There is nothing that is consistent, nothing that's reliable. And Western scholars need to start hammering this home hard. And I hope you as an audience will start using this information and start bringing these things up. The historical method is the most powerful. Hello, historical Christianity, welcome. The historical method really powerfully takes Islam apart. You don't have to get bogged down in doctrinal, well, Quran 9:31 says this, no, but 9:42 says the following. You don't have to get into that and go in circles with Quran gotcha and verse gotcha. The historical method deconstructs Islam and leaves them with no leg to stand on. So, how does Hisham's abridgment vary from Ibn Ishaq's original, or supposed original? 1, they removed what they called the Israeliyat. These were, shall we say, hadiths or reports. These were things that would go into the Mishnah, go into the Talmud, right? So Ibn Hisham removed stories and traditions from Jewish sources that were in Ibn Ishaq's original work because they borrowed extensively from Jewish sources, the things that go into the Mishnah. And of course, this was now taken out because they stopped liking the Jews. 2, and also, of course, they don't want to show that they are actually either heretical, unorthodox Jews or Christians. In other words, they are not just plagiarists, but they were heretics, right? There is that. So they wanted to disassociate and separate themselves. And elimination of plagiarized poems. Ibn Hisham removed poems he considered to be fabricated or inauthentic. How would he know that these were fabricated or inauthentic? 3, addition of linguistic and genealogical data. He added data. Where did he get the data? You tell me. Ibn Hisham expanded on language, explanations, and genealogical information. Where does this information come from? It's not in the Quran. So the source of this additional expanded information is, your guess is as good as mine. And he rewrote it to focus on Muhammad's life. So Ibn Hisham narrowed the scope to focus more specifically on the biography of Muhammad. Now remember, I did show you in part 1, it's the sirah. The sirah are the wars of Muhammad. So effectively these contain the political structure of Islam, the actions of Muhammad in a political and warfare context. So siyar are the battles of the Prophet, the wars of the Prophet. So this guides the Ummah in how to make war on non-Muslims, how to make war on the kuffar. If you're wondering, that means you, if you're not a Muslim. So this is what we get from that, the political system, the social application, laws, and so on. And none of it is about peace. It's about how to spread Islam using aggression. Hello, Erwin, welcome. So, Ibn Hisham narrowed the scope to focus more specifically on the biography of Muhammad, removing some of Ibn Ishaq's broader historical context. So in other words, probably removed things that they could find no corroboration for within the historical record. As a philologist, and also separation of authentic and supposedly fabricated poetry. So as a philologist, Ibn Hisham attempted to distinguish between original and fabricated poetry mentioned by Ibn Ishaq. Fantastic. Juice Rock. It's hilarious how innovation is completely forbidden in Islam, yet the whole religion is innovated. Deep delusions. Yes, for sure. Right. He also reorganized poetic content. Now, this is something that's worthy a larger discussion, and as well when you get into the whole idea of ancient Arabic culture pre-Islam and also post-Islam, but certainly pre-Islam and around the time of the birth and the youth of Muhammad, you look at poetry, how important poetry was, because you're looking at a culture that for some reason wasn't much of a written culture, although the cultures around them were heavily involved in writing. This culture is based on oral tradition, and the way that they remembered things, the way that they glorified things was through the spoken word, through poetry. And of course, the best poets were possessed by demons, by the jinn. And of course, the way to glorify someone, to remember them, was to write a poem about them, write a song about them, a story about them. And then, yeah. And of course, the jinn were the ones that created the best authors. You gave yourself over to a demon. And of course, how much of the Quran is poetic? And we have hadiths that speak about this being an influence on the Quran. Just poetry. So anyway, reorganization of poetic content. Ibn Hisham tended to group poetry related to specific events together rather than dispersing it throughout the narrative. This is something worth discussing, and I need to just finish my notes on that because that's worthy of discussion, because that links to the jinn and the involvement of demonology in Islam. To swear and use bad, disgusting language in Turkish is called kufur. Interesting. Yeah. And the Wizard's Word says, thank you, Infinite Reach Ministries, and the Wizard's Word says, you would think, if genuine, Muhammad's mother would be held in high regard, not sitting in hell. Yeah, it's not exactly Mother Mary, right? Is she? And yeah, his father was called Abdullah, but Allah wasn't a deity back then, so who was he the slave of Allah to? I mean, which Allah was he the slave of? Those are questions. So yeah, guys, if you do like the content, I'm streaming live. I should be streaming live on Rumble, on X, and on YouTube. If you like the content, please do share it. Let people know and use the content. You know, share it on your own channels, make it into clips, and use these in your own social media posts and have in your discussions, your online polemics, online apologetics. All right. And if you like what I'm doing, please do support the channel. That's always much appreciated. All right. Now, addition of explanatory notes. Ibn Hisham included his own commentaries and explanations, often introduced by the phrase Qala ibn Hisham, or Ibn Hisham said. Right? Of course, in the Bible, you've got I, Paul, say. You have quotes like that. So, abridgment of certain sections. So, Ibn Hisham shortened the second and third parts of Ibn Ishaq's work, which affected the narrative flow to some extent. And he elaborated on certain hadiths and events, so he sometimes provided more detailed versions of traditions and incidents than Ibn Ishaq. Where did this information come from? So these all resulted in his version becoming more widely accepted and used by scholars while preserving much of Ibn Ishaq's original content and approach and deleting a whole bunch of it besides. Right, now let's have a look at In God's Path, the Arab Conquest and the Creation of an Islamic Empire by Robert Hoyland. So there is evidence of widespread fabrication. We've discussed this already. Numerous scholars for the last 150 years have been saying this. The Islamic sources are based on fabrication. I spent a year sitting with Umar I's son, Abdullah, who died in 693, said one legal scholar, and I did not hear him transmit anything from the Prophet. That's on page 137. I did not hear him transmit anything from the Prophet. Fascinating. We'll learn from another scholar, writing around 740, who observes, I never heard Jabir ibn Zayd, who died around 720, say, the Prophet said. And yet the young men around here are saying it 20 times an hour. So let me see, the Prophet of Allah said, the Apostle of Allah said. That's constantly in the Hadiths, and here you've got these sources going, well, we never heard that. That's news to us. So there are plenty of Islamic sources that actually deny the Islamic sources. Now, did Muhammad say or do something? So starting in the early 8th century, through an emerging body of Muslim scholars began working through this ancient corpus, that's all of these reports, all of these various conflicting sirah, and they accepted, rejected, or modified the material, giving those that they endorsed a done or said by Muhammad stamp. I've already discussed previously that all of these endorsements, all of these hadiths, all of these chains of narration seem to favor a given theological or political or social agenda. So these are based on this group prefers this interpretation, and therefore they come up with a hadith or a group of hadiths that bolster their particular point of view, their particular agenda, and then they redact it back into the past and say, well, the Prophet said, or the companions of the Prophet said. None of these things are provable, so it's all fabricated. So they had a done or said by Muhammad stamp, which lent old practices the appearance of being new Islamic ones from Arabia. Some of them were appealing to old pagan practices. Some of them were appealing to old tribal practices, so that they could continue within their given tribal circumstances or cultural circumstances, and while pretending that this is supposed to be Islam. For example, 2 6th century documents on papyrus from Petra and Nasana in Byzantine Arabia record the division of an inheritance by the drawing of lots. So the whole practice of drawing of lots was a pagan practice that was done in front of the Kaaba, in front of your idol, and you prayed to your idol and you asked them for luck. So the idol Hubal, Baal, who was the Allah at the time of Muhammad's birth and to whom Muhammad was consecrated, they would draw lots. They would have these games of chance they would play using arrows or sticks, and that would be how they would do things. So this was a pagan practice that they retained. And they say here this was done as opposed to applying a set of preordained rules. They didn't have a proper legal system. Correct me if I'm wrong, the Wizard's Word says. Did Allah never speak directly to Muhammad? Is that right? Yes. So Muhammad never spoke to Allah. Muhammad had the intermediary supposedly of Jibril, right, the angel Gabriel. But don't forget, that's only the 4th version of the story. The first 3 versions were that he was visited by a number of angels. He was visited by the Holy Spirit, which gave him revelation. And then there was a 3rd one, there was some other story, and then the 4th one, eventually, there were multiple versions of the story of Muhammad's prophethood. I covered that a few days ago. Last couple of weeks I did this, the whole creation of the Muhammad prophethood myth. There were multiple competing versions. There were at least 4 versions of the story by Al-Zuhri. And then, of course, they picked eventually that Gabriel, the one angel they could identify from the Bible, this angel, they used that as the way to sort of verify his prophethood. So now, if we turn to collections of Muhammad's sayings, we find it written there that Muhammad was once approached by 2 men who disagreed about an inheritance, and he told them to cast lots and to accept whatever this result yielded. Right, now these are 2 6th century documents, right? These are 2 6th century documents. This means it's pre-Islamic, it's pre-Muhammad. And then of course now Muhammad suddenly comes along and he's saying, hey guys, do this pagan thing that comes before Islam. Do this practice. So again, now you can see they've taken an old practice and kind of said, well, Muhammad said. That's fiction. Now this is from Robert Hoyland in God's Path. So yes, this is a little bit of, I think you can all see what's going on here. All right. Now, a great many traditions are post 820 AD. So now you're looking at traditions that are pre-Islamic, that were added in or retained, right? And now, of course, you're looking at a lot of old traditions. So let's have a look. Joseph Schacht lived from 1902 to 69. He was the foremost scholar of Islamic law in the Western world at the time. He wrote a study of the origins of Islamic law in which he observed that even the classical corpus of Hadith contains a great many traditions which cannot possibly be authentic. All efforts to extract from this often self-contradictory mass an authentic core by historic intuition, as it has been called, have failed, because there are so many competing versions, contradictory competing versions. Something I said a couple of days ago while discussing Mecca is that the one difference between the lie and the truth, the one thing that sets the truth apart, is the truth has one version. The lie has many. You've got many, many competing versions that cannot all be true. And they all claim to be the truth. So this already tells us these are fabrications. This is a story, and eventually they just picked whatever, they just threw whatever stuck against the wall after they threw it there. They took that. He backed up Goldziah's finding that the great majority of traditions from the Prophet are documents not of the time to which they claim to belong, but of successive stages of development of doctrines during the first centuries of Islam. So this was a work in progress. This was something that took hundreds of years, and different groups were adding their own agenda, and they were justifying it by creating sources that justified their particular legal, moral, social, and religious agendas. Schacht went even beyond Goldziah's arguments, concluding, for instance, that a great many traditions in the classical and other collections were put into circulation only after Imam Shafi's time. He is the Islamic jurist Shafi, who died in 820. The first considerable body of legal traditions from the Prophet originated towards the middle of the 2nd century. So the Sharia really started to take shape only after Shafi. Shafi was critically important in the construction of a single cohesive Islamic law, the Sharia. So prior to that, there were different cultural rules and laws that were being opposed. So Arabian culture, so a little bit of Roman stuff, some Zoroastrian stuff, some Jewish law, and so on. And they needed to construct a single set of common social, legal, and cultural rules, and that was in the Sharia. Now, of course, the Sharia only really within the 10th century starts to become a complete system, but around the 850s is when it starts to coalesce into one system, and that's because of Shafi. He harmonizes, he creates a core around which all of these the different schools can now coalesce. So that's Shafi's contribution. I covered that in my Sharia series. Right, so he was a critically important jurist. He, of course, is called one of the Mujtahids Mutlaq. Mutlaq means absolute scholars. He founds one of the schools of jurisprudence, or the schools of fiqh, right? The Shafi'i school. And so he's a Mujtahid Mutlaq. He's an absolute scholar. His rulings are supreme. They're absolute. They cannot be wrong. Yes, Islam is just a horror story. Yep. Now, the evidence of legal traditions carries us back to about the year 100 after Hijrah only. Great. 100 AH only. So 100 AH, which means that, so if the Hijrah is in what, 622, so it's like goes into the 700s. So the legal traditions doesn't go back to Mohammed. It goes back to a century after the founding of the Hijrah. Right? That is to the first decade of the 8th century. Not any closer to the time Muhammad is supposed to have lived. So you're looking at, so the legal traditions, the Sharia, seems to form a century after Muhammad. Now, let's look at Wansbrough and Patricia Kroner. John Wansbrough lived 1928 to 2002, American historian who taught at the University of London, and he amplifies the work of the earlier scholars who doubted the historical value of the early Islamic texts. Wansbrough puts forward that the Quran was developed primarily to establish Islam's origins in Arabia. They needed to create a new origin story. They go to a blank piece of desert and they start on a blank slate with a place that has no history, a place that is not known, so they can create a new Jerusalem and a new Bible and a new Jesus. They've got Mecca, Muhammad, and the Quran. And this is where we're at. They needed to establish it as part of this region, this culture, Arabian culture. He says the Hadith were fabricated in order to give the Arabian Empire a distinctive religion so as to foster its stability and unity. I've discussed this in my Sharia talks. You had all of these disparate empires. They were conquering left and right. They were invading and killing and raping and murdering left and right, conquering left and right, and they needed to merge and join all of these different cultures around a common set of ideals, common set of laws, a common set of beliefs. And that is exactly what they did here. Influenced by this, the historians Patricia Kroner, a protege of Wansbrough, and Michael Cook, a protege of the eminent historian of the Middle East, Bernard Lewis, published Hagerism, the Making of the Islamic World, in 1977. Krohn and Cook noted the lateness and unreliability of the bulk of the early Islamic sources about Muhammad and the origin of Islam. So they wanted to reconstruct the birth and early development of the religion by looking at the available historical, archaeological, and philological records. So, including coins minted in the region during the 7th and 8th centuries. Now, of course, if you're a major trading empire, you're going to have coins from all over because people will be traveling up and down and they'll be bringing back coins and so on. So you'll have a mixture of coins. How many old coins were found in Arabia? Well, basically nothing. So, if not zero, very close to it. So, that already is a major problem with Islam. So, Cronin Cook said that Islam arose as a movement within Judaism, but centered on Abraham and his son Ishmael through his concubine Hagar, as many of the earliest non-Muslim sources refer to the Arabians not as Muslims, but as Hagarians or Hagarines. Hagarines, right? They were the Hagarines. They Hagar. So the Hagarines are so they were also called the Saracens. Saracens meaning the destitute of Sarah. The destitute of Sarah meaning Sarah kicked out Ishmael. She kicked out Hagar because they were abusing her son. Ishmael was abusing Isaac. He was a danger to Isaac, right? So the Saracens, right, the destitute of Sarah. So Abraham's wife Sarah sent them packing, and that was that, right? So they're identified as Hagarines, the ones who descend from Hagar. So this movement, for a variety of reasons, split from Judaism in the last decade of the 7th century and began development into what would ultimately become Islam. In 87, Crone published Meccan Trade and the Rise of Islam, in which he demonstrated that one of the main foundations of the canonical Islamic biography of Mohammed, its Arabian setting with Mecca as a center for trade, was not supported by any contemporary records. The records indicate that Mecca was not such a center at all. Crone, like Wansborough, saw Islam's Arabian setting as read back into the religion's literature at a later date for political purposes. So yeah, any thoughts from the audience on that so far? I'd love to know your thoughts of what you think of this, because yeah, none of this seems to add up. You've got too many scholars that are telling us that this is all fake. I just want to double check that this is, yeah, it's playing on X. That's fantastic. Yep, looks like I'm streaming live on X, and I should be live on Rumble as well. Let me just double check that is streaming correctly. Yep, streaming live on Rumble, so great. Okay, let me continue here. Yeah, so streaming live on Rumble and X, I'm using a different software these days. I've got, when I have guests, obviously I'm using StreamYard, but I'm using a different piece of software, and I'm able to stream to Rumble, X, and YouTube simultaneously. So weren't they also called Ishmaelites? Yeah, Ishmaelites, Hagarines, Saracens. It's all really, I mean, it's all much of a muchness, right? Yeah, just deception and ignorance, correct, little domain? Yes, lots of it. So with all this debunking research, how is there still Islam and followers of? Yeah, I mean, that's the closing of the Muslim mind, right? They are not allowed to look outside of the narrative that they are given, right? This is not something that's allowed. That's considered treason. That would undermine Islam. So the truth is what the Sharia tells you, and that you get from your scholars. So yes, but we need to, one, tell people about this. We need to speak about this. We need to spread this so that you inoculate your people against the lie. And you have to speak about it, because silence means that they can continue to spread their lie, but you need to counter it with the truth. And over time, eventually the truth will win out. So, Petron Mecca, Yemeni Mecca, Mecca Mecca. It's such a fake religion that trying to unite it makes everything even more convoluted. Now, fair enough. I mean, I don't think Petra has as much of a role as people make out. A lot more of it seems to be linked to Yemen. Yemen had a massive influence over that. But yeah, like Sirius at the beginning of the Warriors, it was established to unite the rivaling Arabic tribes. Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, so let's continue. Right, so Islam's Arabian setting was read back into the religion's literature at a later date for political purposes. It's all propaganda. In other words, it's propaganda. Yeah, in the UK, if I started telling people this, I'd be an Islamophobe and arrested for offending. So yeah. Well, yeah, I know the UK, I mean, you're living under communism now. Let's be honest. So later, Crone asserted the evidence that a prophet was active among the Arabs in the early decades of the 7th century must be said to be exceptionally good. Now, she could have been pressured into saying that, but I would say there seems to have been one or more prophets. So Muhammad may not be, obviously he's modeled on Jesus, we know this, but there were false prophets at the time, and it seems that you've got this composite. So Muhammad seems to be a composite of one or more individuals, and of course this goes back to the Muqarrib, who was the priest king, the warrior priest king, who had to make war, and of course served the moon god, who was the war and moon god. So you've got this old Yemen tradition that he's carrying over. It's just the boy Jason. In the UK, it's like communism mixed with people. Yeah, graping goats establishment. You don't quite understand that, yeah. So let me see if I can actually. No, the software doesn't allow me to display comments. Sadly, no, it doesn't allow me that facility. It would be really nice if it did. Okay, right. Let's continue though. Location, location, location. So I've got 4 more slides to go on this one, right? And these hadiths. Let's have a look at where these hadiths come from, right? Including the Sira, but let's have a look at the Kitab al-Sitta, the 6 books, the 6 canonical books that define the major corpus of the Hadith. And of course, this is based on the Jewish practice of having the 6 books that are the main tractates of the Talmud, right? So they've just borrowed this idea. Oh, grape, drop the G. Oh, of course. Yeah, okay, anyway. So, let's have a look, okay? You've got Bukhari, Mohamed ibn Ismail al-Bukhari. Where is he? Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan, you go to Mecca, you turn right, you go on your camel for like, I don't know, 6 or 7 months, and then you turn left and you get to Uzbekistan. He wrote Sahih al-Bukhari. As we know, it's actually Da'if al-Bukhari. Ask anytime we quote from it, we get told by Muslims it's Da'if, right? So, of course, Mecca so far away, mate. Yeah. So, Sahih Bukhari, Uzbekistan. Of course, not Mecca. I mean, good grief. Why would you want to write that in Mecca? Then, Muslim, Ibn Hajjaj al-Nisapuri, who wrote Sahih Muslim in Iran. Of course. And of course, you know that those Shia Muslims are not real Muslims. They're fake Muslims, right? Ask any Sunni. Right. Muhammad ibn Majah al-Khazwini, Iran. He wrote Sunan ibn Majah. Okay, so that's Iran. Iran is you go to Mecca, you go northeast on your camel for like 5.5 months and you make a left. And you're in Iran. So there you go. Right, it's very close to Mecca, really. True story. Okay. Then, of course, you've got Suleiman ibn al-Ashad, Iran, Sunan Abu Dawud. The Sunan. Sunnah, and the Sunan is a plural of that, right? Sunan Abu Dawud. Then you have Muhammad ibn Isa al-Salmi al-Tirmidhi, Uzbekistan, Sunan al-Tirmidhi. And then Ahmad ibn Shu'aib al-Nasai, Turkmenistan. Yeah, as you can see, Mecca, 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 and Mecca. If Mecca is the hub of Islam, how come these major sources of Islam don't come from Mecca? It's somehow these guys forgot to, be in Mecca. That's weird. It's like Islam was manufactured in China. It's like it's got to look. If you had to grab Islam, turn it upside down, pull down its undies, and check the label on its underwear, it would be made in Uzbekistan. That doesn't jibe with the standard Islamic narrative, because I thought Islam was made in Mecca somehow, but it seems not. It's made in Turkmen. Where is Turkmenistan even? Okay, so let's have a look. Here's Saudi Arabia. Mecca's around here, right? Mecca's roughly around here under the S, give or take, right? Here's Iran. Yeah, you can see Iran. I mean, it's only centimeters. As you can see, guy, it's centimeters away. Iran is centimeters from Mecca. So yeah, it's centimeters away. It's like I can move there in like less than 1 second with my mouse. Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. Yes, definitely made in Mecca for sure. So what if Mecca was the Canadian KFC store that made their chicken halal? Because in Hadith it's halal to lick each other's fingers. Oh yeah, disgusting. Ugh, Islam. Yeah. I was in Dubai in an MR property and I broke a few floor tiles. I went to the office and complimented his Islamic cell phone ringtone. He fixed it for free, no joke. Oh, wow. Alan Murad says, I'm from Turkmenistan. Fascinating stuff. So yeah, so Islam, as you know, at least one portion of the Kitab al-Sitta is made in Turkmenistan. Yeah, Turkmenistan. Sunan al-Nasai. So yes, I don't know. Somehow I get the feeling these places are not Mecca, but that's just me. It's this distance, exactly. It's close. It's like this far away. It's like, oh, look at the map. It's only that far. Right, let's move on. So, last 3 slides. Now, briefly, Talmud versus Sharia, right? You've got a borrowing from the Jewish legal system. Let's have a quick look at some of the words that are being borrowed. Is it original? No. Right? So, Juice Rock, I don't love this argument since Muslims would think they're clever and counter by saying how many church fathers and books were written from Europe instead of Jerusalem. Did those guys write the Bible? Because we don't have Hadiths. We don't have a Sira. We've only got the Bible. Those church fathers didn't write the Bible. They wrote commentaries. But these, ask them to show you in the Quran how to do the 5 daily prayers. The process. It's not there. Where'd they get it? They need these books. Ask them if they've lied to you, and ask them if they've been mistaken or if they've fabricated the names of all of Muhammad's wives. Ask them to show you where in the Quran are the names of all of Muhammad's wives. It's not in there. They're going to have to go to the Hadiths and they're going to have to go to the Sira, because these facts are not available in the Quran. The Quran is highly incomplete. It's got almost nothing in it. So it's the most general of books. You got to get the specifics. You have to go to these sources that they claim are weak and unreliable and false and fabricated. Even they will do so. When you point out the embarrassment in it, they will say these sources are not reliable. And so ask them, are you lying about the names of Muhammad's wives? If it's not in the Quran, then I guess Muslims must be lying. So honestly, they score an own goal there. You need to press them on these issues. So how in God's heavens can Mecca be in those countries if Saudi Arabia is the hotspot of those Islamists at that time? Well, Mecca is only the most famous, busiest hotspot city in the world. So yeah, Islam definitely, the Sharia developed in Iraq, right? The Sharia developed in Iraq, not in Mecca. Right? Imagine reading so-called religious books and having to go elsewhere for the rest. That's silly. Exactly. That's your Quran, but you have to go outside the Quran to get corroborating detail. So yeah, the Quran is falsified. Okay, the Torah is the written law, right? The Jewish word for that was Korah, right? And of course you've got the Kara, right? Which is the Arabization of the Hebrew term, the Korah, the Quran, to proclaim, right? To proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ. Interpreted and expanded upon in the Talmud, interpreted and expanded in the Sharia. So the Torah is expanded in the Talmud, the Quran is interpreted and expanded in the Sharia, right? The oral tradition, the Mishnah, right, is called the Sunnah, right? It's called the 6 books of the Mishnah. And you have the oral law, the Sunnah, and the Kitab al-Sittah, the 6 books. So this is really just borrowing. You have the Hadith, right? Known as the Hadith. The S has been Arabized to TH. Hadith, right? In fact, if you go speak to people from the Indian subcontinent, they'll say Hadith. Very, very similar. It's simply just from one language to the next, they've just changed it over. These are all borrowings. They've simply made a duplicate. They've taken the whole Jewish sources, duplicated them, and just twisted them upside down. Hakol, Ijma, Hekesh, Kiyas, Halacha, legal doctrine. Okay? Fiqh is legal doctrine, and the halacha, place of legal education. Halakha. Yeah, doesn't look like a borrowing at all. The Midrash is the tafsir. The Baraita is... I did figure these out at one point. But you've got the Tosefta, you've got the Shadla commentaries, and so on. So these are really just almost direct borrowings taken from Judaism. Right, let's have a quick look at this. Iraq. Right, this is Iraq. This is a map of Iraq. You've got Kufa in the south, and you've got 2 academies, right? And then 2 more are only 140 kilometers away. So you've got Baghdad over here. Now look here. Wherever the Jews, remember there was something like 12, maybe 14, but we know of at least 12 Jewish academies, right? Yeshivas, that were in Iraq at the time. So the Muslims built their academies very close by. The Muslims built their academies very close by. Ultimately, they destroyed or they took over these academies completely. No one knows where all of them are. But we do know that the major academies had Muslim academies go up very close by, often in the same street, and sometimes people would convert and switch. So they were basically aping what the Jews were doing. So, yeah, even the standardization of the Arabic language is done or influenced by the Persians, like Sibewa, Kasai. Yeah. And a lot of these words also that you see, like Kisai and so on, if you look at these terms, they are pagan terms for pagan gods, right? So yes, Jews struck plagiarism at its finest, exactly. And Iran was Zoroastrian, Gnostic at the time, yes. So, and there was paganism going on, and so you'll find many of these terms, you trace them back, they are pagan gods, pagan goddesses, and so on. It's all linked to paganism. So yeah, you've got this in Iraq, you've got these major Jewish, they said there was probably 12 or 14 or so of these that we know of, and we can't trace them anymore. They were simply destroyed. The Muslims destroyed them or took them over, right? Now, in terms of the Islamic law, material influences causing changes in the doctrines of other Islamic law schools continued to proceed almost exclusively from the law schools of Iraq, right? Schacht concluded with Goldziher that Mohammedan jurisprudence originated in Iraq, not Mecca, Iraq. So Islam is manufactured, like I said, if you take Islam, turn it upside down, grab its undies, check the label, it'll say made in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Iraq. Not made in Mecca, made somewhere else. So what if the Muslims at that time tried to take over against the Bible since they were demon manifested as well as Antichrist? Well, yeah, I mean, that's what we would think, right? Okay, so Islamic jurisprudence emerged on the banks of the Euphrates River and not on the sands of Arabia, home of the Prophet and birthplace of Islam. So then you're looking at an area that is far closer to Iran, Iraq, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. So yeah, Islam made in Uzbeki, Turkmeni, Irani, Irakistan. There you go. Yeah, my CDs are in Iraq. Yeah, okay, my apologies. Okay, yeah, it's given old Joker home week. We'll forgive you for that. You're Shabilia says you're assuming they were wearing underwear. Oh my golly. Ugh, that's a brain stabbing image. Please don't say that again. I was trying to be civilized here. This is a family friendly channel. Was this the Shia Sunni split that happened in the 8th century? Possibly. I don't know. To be honest, I need to have a look into that. But yeah, exactly, Little Domain. So what are you guys getting out of this so far? Does all this make coherent sense? Right? You've got all of these scholars, all of the scholarship showing there are serious issues here. Even the Muslim scholars come out and bluntly say there are problems here. There are things that are not worth believing here. There are concerns here. There are problems. There are contradictions. There are multiple different sources that don't agree. So yeah, Stan was famous to have his name at the end of every country. Stan, yeah, maybe it's the guy called Stan. Exactly. We need to go and have a chat with Stan. So the present. So anyway, so you've got here completed about the time of the Prophet's birth. Okay, so some of these sources were completed about the time of Muhammad's birth, so it wasn't original or new to Muhammad. And the site of the most important early the site of the most important early Islamic law school was the Hanafi school at Kufa. This was close to the Jewish academies of Sura and Pumbedita, where scholars studied the Talmud throughout the formative period of Islamic law. Now remember, Islamic law it really got kicked off in the 9th century, and the Shafi, who created the framework and the structure that everyone else followed, because he was able to harmonize these four schools. And then it really sort of 100 years later, within the mid 900s, 950 or so, now you had a generally cohesive system, but the Sharia was only completed in the 1500s, the 16th century, 14th, 15th, 16th century. That's when it was finalized. So the Sharia took 800, 900 years to complete. It was not something that was sent down, boom. We're talking in the medieval era. This is when the Sharia was really finalized and complete and done. So Islam, at least in that sense, took hundreds of years to be created, to be finalized, right? So they speak of Iraqi jurists included local converts to Islam, both Jews and others, who spoke the Eastern Talmudic Aramaic, which remained the lingua franca of Iraq for centuries after the Arab conquest. So yeah, think of that. I mean, yeah, just consider that, factor that into your thoughts. But you're looking at lots of people that came over bringing knowledge. And let me see. Hey man, do you know about the other name for the Mishnah? I grew up in Orthodox Jewish and never heard about the Sunnah. I got that from, let me see, what's the name of that source? Let me try and find that document for you. Let me just try and find that. Roots PDF. Yeah, I'm just finding the document, found it. Let me just open it. There you go. Okay, so this is here. Um, yeah, Islamic and Talmudic jurisprudence: the four roots of Islamic law and their Talmudic counterparts, by Judith Romney Wegner. So if I recall, this is from Temple University. Here's the JSTOR link. Let me just go left here. Now you should be able to find that. So JSTOR 844605. You can have a look at that paper there, right? Rabbinic law was a system of law akin at many points to Arabian custom, founded on the same monotheistic principles and imbued with the same spirit as Islam. I'm not saying I agree with everything this woman says, because very often I don't agree with what these academic scholars have to say about Islam, because they tend to have this what shall we say, biased view, or they don't want to get stabbed in the parking lot or murdered. But yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so there's different software that I use. So you might find certain software useful. There's a software called Everything, right? I'm just going to bring up. So this is a software called Everything. For instance, I recommend you all get it. It replaces the Windows search, right? And I just typed in Islam here. So let me think of another word. So I'll type in Mishnah. No, I don't have anything. So let me call Ghazali. Okay, I'll type in Ghazali. Oh, my bad. Typo. So I typed in Ghazali. It has now found everything on my hard drives, or all my hard drives, that have to do with Ghazali, right? So I've got everything here. If I click on this, it'll bring up a sample on the side here, Islam series Al-Ghazali. So this allows me to find literally anything on my hard drives in a moment, like under a second, right? Voidtools.com, correct. You're going to need this. So this is far, far superior to Windows Search. Windows Search cannot remotely compare with this. So for instance, Fiqh Sira. So for instance, if I type in Fiqh, FIQ, PDF, then it's going to bring up everything with the word fiqh in it, right? At this point, I'm searching on a whole bunch of hard drives. You can see I've got a number of backups. I've got one, two, three, four. I've got four local backups, and I've got like three external. I've got like 7 to 8 backups of all of my files. So I've got about 7 or 8 backups. So if I lose one whole hard drive, I've got 6 to 7 more backups, okay? So anyway, so Ibn Qudama, Fiqh. So if you're looking for a particular file name, this would be the best place. And I'm looking on an external drive, so it's a little bit slower. But this software is incredibly fast, okay? As I said, it's a little bit slower. It's looking on an external drive. And this is one of my backups. So yeah, you can find all of this here. So Everything will find anything. It takes 2-3 seconds to index your hard drive, look for a file, type in the name, and you can type in partial names, right? So I can type in partial names, it'll find it. So if I go Shar and I go PPT, here's everything on Sharia with a PowerPoint, right? So that's everything there. And it's going to bring up a sample on the right. So I recommend you get this Void Tools. And then, of course, I've got other software that allows me to search inside the documents as well, right? So the wizard's words, yeah, that's not funny. So anyway, yep. So let me see. Let's see what else. This reminds me of the whole excellent large idea Mel presented from AJ Deuce, and when he linked the jinn to the jinn. To be honest, I'm very skeptical of AJ Deuce. I'm very skeptical. His individual facts may be sound, but his conclusions, I'm doubtful. I just have questions. And there were occasions when Mel was going through some of the material that the facts themselves, the individual facts seem sound, but they support completely different conclusions. It's like Lego. You have these Lego blocks and they say you can only build a car. Well, maybe you can build a truck. Maybe you can build a house. Maybe you can build a tree. Maybe you can build a garden with the same Lego blocks. So those same Lego blocks can have a completely different interpretation. So I have a couple of questions around that. Wasn't there a school of magic in Islamic times? Yes, you're looking at the school in Haran, right? But that would have been part of the whole Gnostic approach. But Haran, just across the border from Syria and Turkey. Right, let's continue. I've got like my last slide. So page lost. And we've been going for 59 minutes and 32 seconds. That's great. Right, Muhammad banned alcohol. So I'll give you an example, right? We're going to look at the Quran, and we're going to look at the Hadith, and we're going to see then contemporary Islamic sources, right? Hello from the Genesis group in Israel. Welcome. Hey there, good to see you. Yeah, so the only school of magic is my school. So they're so desperate to show that they're an Abrahamic religion to a point that to copy every aspect of Judaism and Christianity. Yes, and the sad thing is, FM Knight, that they're using heterodox, heretical versions of this. I mean, they're using late versions, 4th century documents, 5th century documents, 3rd century documents. And these are Gnostic. These are mythical children's stories. These are anything but actual Orthodox Christianity. So they were using late documents. Why is the Quran filled with Gnostic tales, children's tales, mythical tales, not authentic Orthodox Christianity? Right, so Muhammad banned alcohol. Let's ask that question. So, in the Quran 2:219, they questioned thee about strong drinks and games of chance. Say, in both is great sin. Now remember, the drawing of lots, right? The drawing of lots, that's a sin. But yet you saw that earlier, that they would go in front of the Kaaba. This is when the Kaaba was definitely, most certainly, a pagan site, right? A pagan temple. And they would do that then. And of course, later on, it's redacted to, yeah, Muhammad said we should do that. That's a game of chance, right? So, say, in both is great sin and some utility for men. Yeah, there's some value in alcohol. But the sin of them is greater than their usefulness. Quran 2:219. O you who believe, draw not near unto prayer when you are drunk, till you know that which you utter. So don't come to pray drunk. Right? And that's the Quran 4:43. And the Messenger of Allah said, Allah has cursed alcohol, the one who drinks it, the one who pours it, the one who sells it, the one who buys it, the one who squeezes the grapes, the one for whom it is squeezed, the one who carries it, and the one to whom it is carried. Classed as Sahih by Al-Albani, as stated in Sahih Abi Dawud, who's from Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Bamplakistan, whatever, I don't know, you tell me, okay? And this I got from Islam QA, in case anyone's wondering. I got this. There's more than one. There's plenty of these. I just picked one as an example. Let me just drop that in there. So, yeah, this is from, yeah, I don't know. So, Sunan Abu Dawud from Kerplakistan, or wherever the heck he's from. Prohibition of drinking alcohol in Islam. And this is fatwa number 38145. So, this is the biggest advice site on Islam in the world. I'm assuming they know what they're talking about. So that's just one example. They give plenty. There's plenty of these hadiths that say, no, you can't drink the good stuff. Okay? Now, a mid-8th century contemporary report raises questions about this claim. What if you just make the corks, Erwin? I guess cork making is okay. Right, so Du Huan states, and this is Chinese, the followers of the Confession of Dashi, right? The Dashi is what the Chinese called these Hagarenes or Ishmaelites, behave ridiculously and undisciplined when they drink alcohol, right? This raises the question, did these individuals not receive the ban's message? Because I thought the Quran was established in 9 million BC by Allah in his little crystal palace on the temple tablets in his golden throne room. But apparently not. The notion of Muhammad prohibiting alcohol may have been fabricated to address alcoholism in Arab societies much later. It is suggested that this teaching could have originated in the 9th century, that's the 800s. Muhammad dies in 632, right? The Hijrah happened in 622. So this is the 800s. This is 200 years later. So this alcoholism is rife in Islamic Arab societies. So what they need to do is they need to curb this practice, and they redact this and they put it into the Quran and say, well, yeah, this happened in the early 600s because Mo said so. Yeah. So it is suggested this teaching could have originated in the 9th century rather than the 7th century, because this is, yeah. And that is that. I'll end here today. Okay. So, yet there are Christians and Jews who recognize the cult as Abrahamic. Yeah, these guys are very good propaganda. They're excellent at this. I mean, don't underestimate their ability to tell lies. They're brilliant at this. And shameless. Yeah, OA8X says, yeah, once AJ started speculating, it went off the rails, but the facts about the schools in the area you showed was interesting, like the schools of Sira. Yeah, I mean, that's legitimate. So, I'm a bit more careful with my speculations, but I'm a little speculative. I'm very... Yeah, I don't buy this everything that AJ says, I'm a little cautious. I'm afraid I don't really buy the story. I'm less than enthusiastic. Let's put it that way. So guys, I'll stop here today. It's been like an hour and 4 minutes and 42 seconds. So yeah, hopefully you've learned something helpful. Hopefully you've learned something useful. Hopefully you've gained something that you can use in your polemics, use in your apologetics, and expanded your knowledge of Islam to realize there are problems here. This goes from Western scholarship, Islamic scholarship, historical records, and there's certainly issues here that don't plague the Bible. Now, of course, people will say, well, the Bible, this, the Bible, that, but most of them are lying. Most of them are wrong. It's an error. It's propaganda. But Islam, right? We need to really start getting this information out there. The truth will out. The truth will win. So I'll leave it at that. So guys, thank you. If you enjoy the material, please like, share, subscribe. You can follow me on X at Lloyd de Jong. You can see that on the screen, bottom left there. Now time to rewatch the start. Excellent. Thank you, Oratex. Yeah, so I have family visiting. They'll be sleeping here in this room, my spare room, our extra bedroom. So I've got family staying over from tomorrow to Sunday. So possibly I'll do a stream on Sunday. I know that I've got one scheduled. Hang on 1 second. I have a stream scheduled. Let me find it. I have so I'm supposed to have the 9th. That's in 2 days, on Friday. Yeah. Okay, so I'm supposed to be doing a stream on Friday. Let me just bring that up. Now let me go over there. Let me just bring that up. So here we go. Decoding the original Quran between translation and interpretation. This is on Friday. I've got Usama Dakdok and Saint Murad. Usama Dakdok has taken a little bit of exception to Saint Murad's Quran translation. Of course, Usama Dakdok apparently, so he's made his own Quran, the generous Quran. Saint Murad has just made a more recent and a really thorough analysis of the linguistics. And I guess we want to describe his methodology and, but yeah, so I'll be hosting a discussion between these guys, and hopefully we can clarify. But either way, I don't think we can believe the Quran. It's just, I guess, these guys are going to be discussing their methodology and their results, and we have to look at what the differences are. So, yep. So this is on Friday. That's Friday evening. That is at 8 p.m. So that is at half an hour earlier than this. So yeah, I might have to sleep here and have the family sleep inside. So yeah, okay guys, so that's it. So this is going to be on Sunday and on Friday, what you're seeing here, and then I will probably do something on Sunday again, but let's have this one. And yeah, if there's anything else, let me know briefly in the chat. Otherwise we'll call it a night. So yeah, and FM Night says they're afraid that someone would admit the truth under the influence of alcohol. Too bad, Muslims still drink behind closed doors. Yes, they do. Yeah, when I lived in the Middle East, oh yes. Don't underestimate their ability to tell lies. Made me chuckle. I mean, lying is an obligatory part of Islam. I mean, let's just go here quickly. Let me just go here to X. Let me just go here. If I go to my profile and I go to some replies that I've done, this guy's been telling me, for instance, here, I mean, assault and force of arms is a critical part of Islam. It's a genuine part of Islam. This is what they teach. And then, of course, you've got here, let me just bring this up. This is from the Sharia. They have a chapter on lying, right? You've got a chapter here on permissible lying, lies that are permitted, and then circumventing those, forbidding the permissible. I am one, you are all one, that is forbidding the permissible, right? We don't allow them to spread Islam, which is the permissible, and we are forbidding it. We're stopping them from doing what is permissible, which is spreading Islam. And then obligatory lying and how to give a misleading impression. So yeah, lying is definitely a part of Islam. So yes, this is what they do. So guys, thank you very much. This is Usama Dakdok, has the accurate English translation. Okay guys, yeah, so I think that's it from me for tonight. So hopefully you've learned something, hopefully you've gained something, and I will see you guys in a couple of nights. So all the best, and thank you for the support, for those of you who've been watching. And do sign up, do subscribe, please, and follow me on X. And yeah, Islam needs to be destroyed. Let's work on that real hard. Take care, guys. Good night and God bless. And thanks, Lolo Main, for all the help. Thank you.